In half an hour, football with Match of the Day on the road to Wembley. Highlights from tonight's match between Arsenal and Leeds. And that's after Film 93 with Barrie Norman.
Hello and welcome along once again to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast that wouldn't think twice about reporting the dodgy bloke trying to record Schindler's List on his camcorder directly to the cinema management. I'm Stu Joslin, and joining me as always with the popcorn and fizzy pop is Alex Greenwood. Greenie, we're back off holiday. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling refreshed and ready to go. I'm good, but how are you? Because you were away cruising, weren't you?
Yes, a lovely time was had by all. My podcast batteries have been recharged. We've got a very good topic to start us off in the second half of the year, haven't we?
We have indeed, yeah. And the next episode in our Films of the Decade series, and we've hit, in my opinion, a very, very good year. So looking forward to talking about that later. I should say the listeners are probably going to be a bit confused that we're talking about coming back off our holidays when we've actually had an episode since our holiday break. We recorded that before we went on holiday, and this is the first episode we're recording since coming back from our actual holidays. So that's why we're talking like this.
I was just thinking that myself, but the thing is, nerds and completists on the internet, they love that sort of thing. So I think we should just leave it in and let it roll. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's like a sort of Easter egg.
And what are we both, if not nerds and completists? So I'm definitely not talking out of turn there. Now, Alex, as I've said, it's one of our movie retrospective episodes. So, of course, we need a sponsor who can help us to scratch that cinematic itch. And I'm proud to say that sponsoring us this time, and not before time either, is the legendary Forward Video of Caution. Oh, yeah. Listeners to the podcast can quote the code ALRIGHT90s at the counter to receive an extra night's rental on any 2-night rental video. Of course, please don't forget to rewind your cassettes before returning them. It's just the right thing to do. So many thanks to Forward Video of Caution for sponsoring us tonight.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that's a big memory for me growing up in Caution was visiting Forward Video. And there was another video shop, wasn't there, that was coincidentally was where the old cinema used to be, which was way before our time. But
yeah,
there was a video shop there, wasn't there? I don't know what that was called. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing this is going to appeal to no one who didn't live in Caution. But I mean, just the idea of there being two independent video shops in town, it is a different world, isn't it? A different era.
Absolutely. And I can think of one person who's going to be flocking from the York area to use their Forward Video membership card, which they've still got, of course.
Yes, that's true. Brother of the pod, Adam, still has his Forward Video card. And yeah, he'll be using that in the next few weeks for sure.
Yeah, so get down to Forward Video over the weekend, get your VHSs in, and have an extra night's rental on us. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Speaking of which, actually, because obviously last episode we talked about our birthday honours list and the new positions that were appointed as a result of that. And we did get some paperwork that came in a bit late, didn't we, Stu? So
yes, we did. It's like the transfer deadline day when the fax machine doesn't work and the clubs have to send in the paperwork after hours. Yes, we did get a very, very late nomination.
Yes, absolutely. So we had 3 new legends of the pod that were announced in the last episode. And we actually have another legend of the pod to be added to the ledger. He has been holding the position of brother of the pod for a long time, pretty much from the beginning of the pod, I'd say. So he's already been in the ledger for that whole time. But this is a big promotion and a well-earned and well-deserved promotion. So brother of the pod, Adam, will be relinquishing that position and taking up his new post as the 7th legend of the pod. And I was actually thinking that because he's such a stalwart of the pod, we should probably retire the position of brother of the pod, much like a football team retires a certain number when a legend leaves. So I think, I don't know if it's okay with you, Stu, that we should retire the brother of the pod position. That will not be refilled. And yeah, Adam will be a legend of the pod, but there will be no brother of the pod.
I can think of no greater way to pay our respects to Adam than to do that. But how many brothers do you have?
None. Oh,
How
sorry.
many-
I have one. I read that. I heard that as like, because he's no longer brother of the pod, he's not my brother either.
Wow. We've made him a legend of the pod, and then literally no less than 10 seconds later, I have no brother. That's
Kicked out of the
unbelievable.
family. What I meant was I have one brother, no additional brothers.
How many brothers do I have?
You have 0 brothers.
Correct. So there's nobody else to take on the mantle of brother of the pod in any case.
Well,
So
you say that, Stu, but husband of the pod is neither of our husbands, is he? So that you can get these little intricacies and idiosyncrasies that mean, people can hold these odd positions, and sometimes it happens. But yeah, regardless, our 7th Legend of the Pod confirmed. The ledger is now complete for the time being. Although we have a birthdays on this list, things do get added. People do get added throughout the year. So don't worry about sending in recommendations and your suggestions. But as we always say, not for yourself, because that never works. Well, we never look on it lightly, do we? So time now for What's the Most 90s. We obviously had a week off to do our honours list, but we're back again. And I think this is going to be quite a knotty one here. A lot of different ideas I think will be flooding in. Sort of follows on from our recent one of what the most 90s insult is, because today I'm asking you, Stu, what the most 90s slang term is.
yeah, I didn't have to think too hard about this one. Something came to mind straight away, and that is get a life. So used whenever somebody admitted to having a slightly odd pastime, or when somebody had done something that was not cool, or was wearing something that was uncool, or it could be used as when you were rebuffing somebody that you'd asked out. It can be used in a plethora of situations. It also reminds me of, or it makes me think, I should say, of a US TV sitcom that aired from 1990 to 92 that I've never seen, but I just knew in the back of my head that there was a sitcom called Get a Life. And I had a bit of a look into it. Stars Chris Elliott as a 30-year-old paperboy named Chris Peterson, who lives in an apartment above his parents' garage. The show was unconventional for a primetime sitcom, and many times the storylines of the episodes were surreal. For example, Peterson actually dies in 12 episodes. The causes of death included being crushed by a giant boulder, old age, tonsillitis, stab wounds, gunshot wounds, falling from an aeroplane, strangulation, getting run over by cars, choking on cereal, and simply exploding. For this reason, it was a struggle to get the show on the air at all. So that's Get a Life, the US sitcom. But yeah, like I say, it just springs to mind for a plethora of situations. Like Get a Life, Yeah. So I would have to go for that. What about yourself?
Yeah, Get a Life is that's a really useful one, actually. I need to start using that again. But yeah, good choice for sure. Yeah, I had lots of different ideas. Some of them were very local based. So I was remembering when I was at, I think, primary school sort of age, everyone would describe everything as skill. And I'd totally forgotten this until like thinking of this feature for the episode. Everyone's saying skill, and it's just seemed completely stopped, like dead, and no one did it after that. But I quite like that, and I'm definitely going to start trying to use that again. Mm-hmm. But then a bit later at school, it would have been lush. I think that's probably would be my choice my local choice would be lush. I think that's quite a West Country thing, isn't it? Gert lush especially. But I'm going to say, more globally speaking, I think my answer is going to be putting not at the end of a sentence. So, I think you're really cool, not. And it sounds a bit weird saying in English, actually, because I think it's quite an American thing. So, like, I think it's in Wayne's World. Is that where it comes from, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah. And I think I've chosen that because it's funny, and also because I think it's something that did stop quite abruptly at the end of the 90s. So I think if you spoke to a Gen Z or Gen Z person now, there's a chance they might not know what that was if you did that, which is not true of a lot of 90s slang, which has persisted. It's like lush has made a bit of a comeback. But I think that's why I'm going to choose it. Putting not at the end of a statement. I like how obnoxious it is and sort of irritating. It's kind of it's amusing to me. So my local choice is lush. My global choice is not. But before we decide, Stu, actually, we have some correspondence from our fellow podders out there in the world. We've got a couple of people who have kindly sent us in their submissions for this question. We're going to start actually with Shalina from the Everything 90s podcast, all the way from Ontario, Canada. So it's always nice to have a correspondent from over the pond. And this is Shalina's submission. So let's play that now.
Hey, Alex and Stu, it's Shalina from Everything 90s podcast, hailing from Ontario, Canada. And hello to It'll Be Alright in the 90s listeners. Alex and Stu had asked me to answer the question, what's the most 90s slang term? Before I give you my answer, I'd like to share what some of my listeners had shared with me what they think the most 90s slang term is. So some of them said the bomb, psych, that's tight, and slamming. And the ones that I thought of that are the most 90s slang term is talk to the hand because the face ain't gonna listen, or just talk to the hand, as if, and your fly is open. I don't know if that counts as slang, but yeah, those are the three that I remember hearing and using in the 90s. So I hope everyone is doing well, and thanks for featuring me on your episode. Take care.
So what do you think of that then, Stu? Talk to the hand. That came over here, didn't it? Yeah, it was a big North American import, wasn't it? And your flies open is not something I'm familiar with as being slang. So maybe that just didn't quite make it over here.
No.
I mean, if someone says to me your flies open, it's usually just a factual statement rather than slang, and I'll readily correct it. But I don't know. Yeah, maybe it was just like a jokey thing over there. But thank you very much, Shirley, and that was great. And everyone should check out the Everything 90s podcast presented by Shalina. It's really great, and lots of great episodes over there, and lots of great Instagram content. So if you follow the link in our episode description to find that podcast, you won't be disappointed. And our second input came from Dan from the Odd Pod Show on YouTube over here in the UK this time. So let's see what Dan had to say.
Hey everybody. So 90s slang words or terms. The first one that came to mind was duh or no duh. I think that's okay. I know that slang term's been around since like the 50s, but the 90s is I think where that really took hold, especially in like that's what I saw it in like movies and TV shows, mostly American, not really British, but American. So like no duh or duh. So I'm going to go with that as the most 90s slang is duh or no duh. So yeah, that's my opinion. I think I'm right. No duh.
So would you say that duh is very much in the not canon?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would absolutely. Yeah, I think it's that sort of bratty, obnoxious strain, isn't it? That I quite enjoy, especially when being used to someone in a position of power, or a parent or a teacher, that sort of person. It's especially good. So I'm on board with what Dan said. I think that's a good choice. And Dan did actually very kindly put this out on his own Twitter account, and he got some responses on there. So I'm just going to quickly whiz through some of them. I'm afraid I can't give everyone a name check because there simply isn't time. But we did get some interesting ones here, so I'm just going to go through them now. So there was rad, which I definitely appreciate. I think that's a very cool word. I'm always trying to keep that alive as a slang term. School dinners are cool dinners. It's not something I've heard before, but
no.
Iranu or Uvavu, which is obviously a reference to Vic and Bob.
Indeed.
And there's a couple of Ace Ventura ones. So there was Alrighty Then, done in the style of Ace Ventura. And then there was also another one which was Schmokin. I think that's from Ace Ventura, is it not?
Is that the mask?
Oh yes, the mask. Sorry, yeah, you're right. It's a different Jim Carrey thing, yeah. And then two that are very close to my heart. Don't Have a Cowman from The Simpsons, and which never really took off outside of The Simpsons, did it? I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that unless they were referencing The Simpsons. And the same for Cowabunga, which is in both the Turtles and I think maybe The Simpsons. Maybe it was on Simpsons t-shirts, I'm not sure. But Cowabunga, yeah. Very, very Turtles based there. Someone else saying, putting not at the end of sentences. Totally, saying the word totally. Don't hate me because you ain't me. I think maybe quite an American one, I'm not sure. Saying psych at the end of things, which is obviously Shalina mentioned. And then also, you think you're all that in a bag of chips. It's very nice. So what we're going to put in the ledger then? There's so many to choose from there. That's quite difficult, isn't it?
I think I like not too much.
Okay.
I do. I think I'm going to have to go with your choice.
Okay, I'm happy with that. That's going in the ledger, and we shall now use that wherever we can. Now we urge you, listeners, to also really fully resurrect that and bring it back into the zeitgeist, and put it back in its rightful place at the top of the lexicon.
Absolutely.
So,
the time is now.
Not. There you go.
Okay, on to the main topic of tonight's episode, which is the movies of 1993. And what can I say about our guest tonight? Very special person to me, teacher, five-a-side colleague, friend, fellow musician, Andy Sayles. Welcome to the pod.
Good evening. Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for joining us, mate. How are you doing?
Very well. Really looking forward to doing this. 1993 was a very good year for movies. A lot of interesting stuff out there.
So we normally start off with a look at the top 10 in the box office and then a look at the award winners. In at number 10 for 1993 was The Pelican Brief. Number 9, Philadelphia. Number 8, Sleepless in Seattle. Number 7 was Cliffhanger. Number 6, Indecent Proposal. Number 5 was The Firm. Number 4, Schindler's List. Number 3, The Fugitive. Number 2 was Mrs. Doubtfire. And at number 1, outselling every other movie by about $500 million, was, of course, Jurassic Park. I don't think there are any surprises there. And I think there aren't going to be many surprises in the awards list either, are there, Alex?
Indeed, yes. There's no major surprises here. The best film at both the Oscars and the BAFTAs was Schindler's List. And the best director was also Spielberg for the same film. And then the best actor went to Tom Hanks for the Academy Awards. That was for Philadelphia, of course. But at the BAFTAs, it was Anthony Hopkins for The Remains of the Day. And at both the BAFTAs and the Oscars, Holly Hunter won the Oscar for Best Actress for The Piano. There's obviously other awards, but we won't get into that. But I think what you'd expect there, pretty much.
Absolutely. And as usual, for these episodes, we've each picked 3 of our favourite movies from the year to talk about in a bit more detail. I think, Alex, we'll give our guest right of way first off, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So, Andy, which is your first movie that you've picked to talk about?
All right. Well, the first one I've gone for is Groundhog Day, a classic Bill Murray comedy, directed by Harold Ramis, who wrote it with a guy called Danny Rubin as well. And it's that kind of lovely film that comes out every now and again when you get a truly original idea, something that really kind of slaps the audience in the face. And at the time, it was one of those really high concept things of going, reliving the same day again and again and again, and they get so much high quality comedy and also some good serious bits out of it as well.
I think it's a classic, yeah, absolutely. Classic premise.
And it, I think just the whole message of it is really good as well, because he spends his time, when he realises he's trapped in Puxatawny and he's freaks out initially and he tries in various ways to kill himself, and then he tries just living his life completely to the extremes, and realizes actually the only way you can really be successful as a human being is just to be nice and to help people and to try and do something useful. And it's a really positive message that comes out of it. It sounds very worthy, but it's a good comedy film as well all the way through.
Yeah, it's a nice mix, isn't it? I've not seen it for a few years, but it's something that's easy to rewatch, isn't it? Because of that mix of comedy and pathos and, like you say, a good premise.
It's aged really well, I think, as well. You say it's for rewatch value. It's still good.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you happen to see it when it came out?
Yep, I saw it in the cinema. I contributed to that box office gross. Yeah, it was quite surprising because the director and Harold Ramis, they'd done stuff like him, Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, they'd done the Blues Brothers, done Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation, and it was all that kind of off-the-wall comedy, and it was all generally quite rude and quite silly and quite over the top. And then they smashed it out the park with this lovely, sweet little tale that was funny, but it had its really serious moments. It had kind of actual developed characters rather than just Bill Murray walking around being generally grumpy.
Stu, have you seen it?
I'm going to disgust you both, and this is typical of me in these episodes. I didn't actually give this enough build up in the intro, but Andy, you and I first met when you taught me media studies in my GCSE years.
Yep.
And then we've gone on to be firm friends after that. And I've always respected you as a massive film buff and the man to come to about these matters. So it's not your fault. You didn't teach me badly or anything like that. But there are a lot of classic films that I have never seen or haven't seen yet, I should say. And this is definitely one I'm going to have to put on the list and get watched. So apologies for not being able to contribute on this one. And guess what? It's going to happen again during the rest of the episode. So apologies in advance.
Oh no, it's fine. I envy you. You get to watch these films for the first time. Getting to see Groundhog Day for the first time is what a treat.
Maybe I'll watch it again straight afterwards, just to really, really get into the spirit of things.
Set it up in exactly the same way, several days running. It'll be brilliant. You'll feel like you're living it.
Okay, well, I'll go next then with my first choice, and I'm going to get my bad memory choice out of the way first, if that's okay with you both. So I have picked 2 movies later on which I have seen, and I did enjoy, so I can talk about. But the first movie I've picked is another one that I haven't actually seen. And I'll tell you why. So I have picked The Remains of the Day, released November the 5th, 1993, directed by James Ivory. As I said, I've never seen it and I never intend to. It's linked to a strong negative childhood memory, and I'm not sure I've told this anecdote on the podcast before. So this must have been in about 1995 or 6, I think. So when the film had been out for a few years, we went to Bath shopping, myself and my parents, and I found a VHS in some bargain bin in a video shop called Chris Barrie's Motoring Wheel Nuts. Now, I don't know if you guys know anything about this. It's on YouTube, so I would strongly implore you and the listeners to go and seek it out. But it's an hour-long direct-to-video program that the BBC made of Chris Barrie doing a load of characters driving different cars. And the very, very thin plot is that they're all going to some car show at a stately home. And there's all different characters played by him who have different cars at the time. And that's shite as well, but we don't need to dwell on that. Anyway, so as you are when you're that age and you've got a new video, I was desperate to watch it when I got home, desperate to get it in and get it watched. But The Remains of the Day was on the TV, and it was the first time it had been on TV. And my parents wanted to watch it. There was only one TV in those days, one VCR, of course. And that was the longest 2 hours and 15 minutes of my life because they wouldn't let me watch the tape until the movie was over. So there you go. That's why I've always hated Remains of the Day. Although, looking into it a bit for the pod, I might have figured out why they wanted to see it, apart from it being a big award winner, was that quite a lot of it was filmed in the Southwest and a few scenes in particular at Corsham Court. So it's got some local interest there as well for some of the interior scenes. And also, just finally on The Remains of the Day, there's a very funny skit in This Morning with Richard Not Judy with Lee and Herring, which we've discussed on the podcast before, about or based upon Remains of the Day as well, which I prefer far greater than the movie itself. So there we are. That's my take on Remains of the Day. Have either of you guys seen it?
I haven't, no.
I actively avoid any of those movies, anything like Remains of the Day or Pride and Prejudice or anything that's based on a book I wouldn't want to read. I don't want to watch it either. That seems...
Okay, well, we're all agreed on that then. Let's move swiftly on.
I've also never seen Chris Barrie's Wheel Nuts, but I'll make a note to try and watch it on YouTube.
We'll have to stick a link in the episode description because it's a time capsule from the time, definitely. And it appeared in one of the W.H. Smith catalogues that we popped up on the social media over Christmas as well, with the get your husband the VHS for Christmas and that'll do sort of page, one of those pages. So definitely worth seeking out. Have a look.
Right, so my first one is the only one of the 3 that I actually saw in 1993. I went to see it at the cinema in the Cannon Cinema in Bath, which is now the Comedia Comedy Club. And it's The Secret Garden, which was directed by Agnieszka Holland, but produced by Francis Ford Coppola, so quite a big name behind the scenes there. Also, the director of photography was Roger Deakins, who is like the main director of, like, he's the big name for director of photography and does all like the big, beautiful films, does all like the later Bond films and stuff like that. So it looks amazing. So as I said, I went to see this in 93 when it came out in that cinema. The film story, for anyone who doesn't know, is set during the turn of the 19th, 20th centuries. Follows a girl called Mary whose parents are killed while living in India during the British Empire, and then she's sent to live in her uncle's mansion on the North York Moors. So it's a very sort of brooding, windswept, moody sort of setting for the story. And I think the reason I just like this is that I liked it at the time. It had a big impact on me at the time, and I still like it when I catch it now. It's just a film that's really built on atmosphere, and I think that's something that's sort of stuck with me with films that I watch now. That's the thing that I look for, is a good, strong atmosphere. So as I say, the setting itself was it's on the moors. It's all very gloomy and brooding, but also the storyline is sort of laced with a lot of melancholy and loneliness and lighter moments as well, but sort of personal connections. And yeah, so I think that's why I've chosen it, and why it still resonates with me, is because of that melancholic atmosphere and that vibe that it has. And I just think it's a really good film. I think it got relatively good reviews when it came out, and it's well respected now. And I think you could show it to a child now and they would still get something out of it. It's got Maggie Smith is one of the main characters in it, and she's always good in everything she's in. And the rest of the cast is relatively unknown, but all well acted. And yeah, it's just a great kids film that I think you can watch as an adult. So that's why I've chosen it.
Mary Lennox was an orphan sent from a far-off, distant land to live in a lonely and mysterious mansion.
You are not to touch anything, and you're not to go wandering and poking about.
I heard someone crying.
You heard nothing of the sort.
Somewhere in the forbidden rooms,
Who are you?
she discovered a bedridden cousin
Don't you ever go outside? Never.
who'd never seen the light of day, and met an enchanted boy who spoke with the animals.
Have either of you seen it?
I saw it many years ago. Really enjoyed it. It's just that kind of traditional British quality bit of entertainment that, it's kind of about finding a place in the world. Really lovely film.
Stu,
I think you better move on from me.
Well, we got a lot to get through, so I'm totally happy to move on.
Well, for my second choice, I'm going to go with True Romance, which is a film directed by Tony Scott, but it's written by Quentin Tarantino. And in 1993 was basically Tarantino reaching the height of his powers. He'd had massive success with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and he was the writer that everyone wanted to go to, and he'd sold the script for True Romance, picked up by Tony Scott. He had Natural Born Killers. I can't remember if that had been made or was being made, but the thing about True Romance is that in the hands of a really good director like Tony Scott, who he did Top Gun, he knows how to do visual films. He made this fairly violent film about a guy trying to be in love with a girl, but he made it look beautiful. Incredible lighting, incredible camera work, really good soundtrack, and genuinely a lot of heart and a very sweet film, which was great for that. And it kind of took Tarantino's writing, which is very clever, very fast, very, very, very pop, and gave it a real kind of solid cinematic basis. Really, really, really good film. I think it did pretty well at the box office. It was fairly low budget-ish, but I think it did all right.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool film. I haven't seen it for a long while, but I definitely enjoyed it when I saw it. It's got that, like you say, that sort of snappy Tarantino dialogue, and it's just stylishly shot. And because it's Tony Scott that did it, so that's the guy that did Top Gun as well, right?
Yes, Top Gun, Thelma and Louise. No, was that Ridley Scott? He definitely did Top Gun. He did. He went on to do a Bruce Willis one called The Last Boy Scout, and he was just started off in commercials like his brother Ridley, I think, and it was all kind of very. As a visual filmmaker, he can make the images tell a heck of a story.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of it. I'd like to watch it again. Actually, it's been a long while since I've seen it, but I know it's a lot of people's favorite film or one of their favorite films. It's kind of a cult classic. I quite like the idea of Tarantino writing things but not directing them, because I think his dialogue is really good, but sometimes his films can be a bit too long, especially his later films, and it's sort of interesting to see what happens when he writes them, because like you say, wasn't Natural Born Killers, that was written by Tarantino but directed by Oliver Stone, is that right?
Yeah, Oliver Stone did that one, and again, it's another very interesting visual director. And you're totally right about when Tarantino directs, he tends to keep it very there's not much variety in his camera work. He keeps it quite flat, and in some of the films you think maybe him being in charge isn't a good idea, and you should get an editor to cut out some of the 82 decades worth of dialogue that he's putting in there, just maybe. But I think the same with the Natural Born Killers, and True Romance had this kind of snappiness, and it had a lot more pace to it.
Yeah, definitely, good point.
I'm getting closer because I've seen Natural Born Killers and The Last Boy Scout, so I'm getting closer.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll talk about them when we get to that year.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So I'll lighten the tone if I can a little bit with Cool Runnings. John Turteltaub, released October the 1st, 1993. And of course, it's the final feature film starring John Candy to be released in his lifetime. So I watched this for the first time very recently. And it was always one of those films I found that people spoke about, particularly when I was at secondary school. This was something that would come up a lot, and it was one of those things where if somebody said they hadn't seen it, oh, you never seen Cool Runnings? Oh, it's so good, you know. So it already had that following, certainly when I was at school. And I think it's a great sports film, you know, with a lovely sort of triumph over adversity message, and you know, keep going against the odds and you'll achieve your goal sort of thing that's being displayed. I particularly enjoyed the character Junior Bevel, who sort of gives up a highly paid job and defies his father's wishes to go and compete in this bobsleigh team for Jamaica. And I also enjoyed the fact that one of the characters is called Yul Brynner, which is obviously very, very close to Yul Brynner. And I don't know if that's a deliberate thing or not. But I've always enjoyed John Candy's work. Of course, we've spoken about Home Alone on the podcast before, and rightly so. Planes, Trains, Automobiles, etc. I did find it quite bittersweet when I watched it, because I knew that it was his last full performance that was released before his untimely death. But a lovely film all the same, and I do wish that I had watched that a little bit earlier in my life, so I could have joined in with my friends and spoken about it with them at secondary school. As you said earlier on, Alex, it's good to be able to watch these things for the first time with an older eye on some occasions. So yeah, Cool Runnings. I presume this is familiar to you guys as well.
Yeah, I was like you in that I didn't see it when it came out, and I remember everyone talking about it at school. But then I must have seen it when it came onto terrestrial TV. It's one of those, probably a Christmas movie, wasn't it? Something like that. And yeah, really enjoyed it when it came out. Just good quality Disney live action. I think it's Disney, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, live action. And it's based on a true story, isn't it? From a previous Winter Olympics.
That's right, yeah, loosely based on a true story, yeah.
Andy, what about you? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I definitely saw it in the cinema. I'm pretty sure I saw it in the Curzon Cinema in Loughborough. It's just a great movie, really good, really funny, and genuinely sweet, because it's characters you actually care about. And I think that kind of I love an underdog sports movie. You know, you can't go too far wrong when you've got an underdog sports movie. I mean, this is just the perfect template. I think and you've got the culture clash comedy. I've seen it recently, and surprisingly, it's not in any way racist, which is, I think, quite an achievement these days.
Yeah, I think I was wondering, because I haven't seen it for years. I was wondering, is there any sort of problematic content in there? But yes, good to hear that it's still on the right side of history. And
you're right about the sort of sporting underdog movie being a good template as well. I mean, one of the films that I've enjoyed the most in recent years is The Phantom of the Open. I don't know if you caught that, but that isn't a brilliant. I mean, I was aware of Maurice Flitcroft's story before that, but then to go, and it was a movie I had to go and watch on my own. Nobody was interested in watching it with me. What a surprise! But I really enjoyed that when it came out as well. So yeah, more sporting underdog movies, please.
You zigging? You zagging? Ooh. Always remember, your bones will not break in a bobsled. No, they shatter. So, who wants in?
So my second choice is Dazed and Confused, which is not a film that I saw when it came out. It was released in September of '93, and I only saw it a few years ago now. So this was the third film written and directed by Richard Linklater, who went on to do Boyhood and the Before trilogy, like the Before Sunset, Before Midnight, all those great films. He also directed School of Rock, which is a great film. And I think I've probably mentioned before on the pod that I am a massive fan of the coming of age film. It's probably my favourite genre, up there with horror films at least. And I think this is one of the, if not the best example of that genre, certainly from the 90s. And the story follows a group of kids on the last day of high school, which is, I think, a great subject for a coming of age film. It's because that time of your life is sort of exciting. It's bittersweet, it's melancholy, sort of exciting. And so I think it's a great subject for a coming of age film. I just think it's really well done. With it being Richard Linklater, he's obviously proves himself to be a great writer and director. You can really see it coming through here. Yeah, I think it's got some early roles from Matthew McConaughey and Mila Jovovich are both in it as, not as kids, but sort of maybe teens or early 20s. Ben Affleck as well is in it. And I discovered it a few years ago, and as soon as I saw it, I thought this is brilliant. This is one of the best, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it again. I've sort of given it enough time now that I can build up and watch it again, knowing that it's going to be great. And yeah, that's why I've chosen it. Really, it's just, I think it's one of the best examples of one of my favorite genres. So I had to have it when I saw that it came out this year, and that's why I've got it. Have either of you seen it?
I must have spent a lot of 1993 in the cinema, because again, that's another one I definitely saw in the cinema. Mainly that Richard Linklater is, as you say, is a good writer, and he's so good at just creating characters that feel believable and plausible.
Yeah,
and you actually care about them as well. You kind of go, oh, these are good. These are people I'm interested in, which is a really nice thing to have in a film. You know, they felt very real, rather than they felt like the kind of stereotypical, generic American teenagers. They felt like they had some heart and had some depth to them, which is really lovely.
Yeah. And it follows some of the kids are about to start high school, and then some are leaving. Like it's the end of their whole high school experience, and maybe there's some who are sort of in the middle. But I like that it's got that range. It's not just following one kid; it's following a range, and they're all sort of different. There's people from the different cliques of high school. So, yeah, it's really good for that. Stu, I'm guessing this isn't... I recommend it. Of all of the three, Stu, I reckon this is one that you would enjoy.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Obviously not including the ones you've already seen, but yeah.
I'll allow myself to be guided by greater minds.
Yeah, there you go. Dazed and confused. Right, so it's our third choice now, isn't it? So
it is,
go back round again. Andy.
Right. Well, my third choice became very difficult because I narrowed it down to a Sylvester Stallone film. But he had two biggies that year. He had Cliffhanger and Demolition Man, both of which, for very different reasons, are excellent films. I ended up going for Cliffhanger because it was one of the first films that utterly terrified me watching it in a cinema. It was awful, and I don't know whether I had vertigo before watching it or whether I came out of it with vertigo. So Cliffhanger is about a climber played by Sylvester Stallone who has the name of Gabe Walker, and he takes people up mountains, and in the beginning opening sequence is I don't know what you call it, when basically there's a rope going from one mountain to another and they have to go across it, and a woman, her equipment breaks and she's going to fall, and he tries to grab her and then she falls to her death. And that's just the opening 10 minutes. And after that, you think, oh, that's quite scary. Then it goes off into a kind of a plot about people trying to, you've got a villain played by John Lithgow who's eating the scenery. He's that kind of over the top, chewing away at everything, playing a guy called, I think it's Eric Qualen or something, which is a fairly ridiculous name I'd go for, but he wants to get, I can't remember this money or drugs off the top of my head. I got as far as thinking about it earlier on and thought he needs to get something off the mountain, and they get Gabe Walker to go out there and get it, and it's all very stressful. But it is a lot of people hanging off stuff or falling off stuff, which for a vertigo scenario is quite terrifying. But it's directed by Rennie Harlin, who went on to do Long Kiss Goodnight and Cut Through It Ireland and Die Hard 2. So it's bombastic, it's massive, everything's very high up, very, very exciting, very loud, very dangerous. Thoroughly recommended action film unless you like heights and you want to be able to go up them still.
Yeah, it's a good choice. I I have seen it, but a long time ago. I don't really remember much about it, but I remember enjoying it. And also seeing John Lithgow. I think I was familiar with him from Third Rock from the Sun. That's the only thing I'd seen him in. To see him as his villain was funny. But it's good film, good sliced alone material.
I am planning on watching this very, very soon. Because I've been planning it because my dad had this on VHS. So I remember it well. I remember the cover with Sly on the cover, hanging off something enigmatically. And from that rhapsodic review, Andy, I feel like I'm in no doubt I'm going to enjoy it. So yeah.
Will you be watching it on the same VHS?
I'll have to get up in my parents' loft and find out if it's still there. Knowing them, it probably is. But I happen to know it's also available on a very popular streaming platform. So I think I might go for that option first, if that's okay with you, instead of careering through the plasterboard into their master bedroom on the search for the cliffhanger VHS.
It'd be quite apt if you sort of left hanging, but from the ceiling by like a cord, like the front cover.
We just got an emergency call. 5 climbers are stranded off Combe Left.
I haven't climbed in months. You just lose the feel.
Maybe you mean the nerve.
Where's the helicopter?
What the hell's going on?
What are your names?
Tucker and Walker.
Well, Tucker and Walker, we're missing 3 bags.
What's in them?
None of your fucking business. Fudge!
Okay, so this is another one that I've watched very recently. I've always been curious about this one, and I finally got around to watching it last year. It's the original Super Mario Brothers movie, directed by Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, and released May the 28th, 1993. Now, this, as you both will know, I'm sure, regularly features on lists of the worst movies of all time. It had a very, very difficult production process. Nobody got on. There was loads of rewrites and director changes and everything else. I think there was a power struggle between the 2 directors who were married at the time, and things weren't working out between them, which meant that the movie suffered as a result. Good old Bob Hoskins and his co-star John Leguizamo got drunk before shooting every day and carried on getting drunk as the shoot went on. But the film's now achieved cult status. I could see why it's regarded as a bad movie, but I still enjoyed it a fair amount, probably because of that status it has. Dennis Hopper is fairly ridiculous as Cooper, the main villain. And as you know, Alex, I went to watch the new Super Mario Brothers movie a couple of months ago, and that has also suffered at the hands of the critics, but not as much. So maybe Mario is just a franchise and a character which should be left alone. But I had seen a few seconds of this movie. I remembered a chunk of it where Mario is having to jump down somewhere, and the line is "trust the fungus." There's some fungus that he needs to land on and bounce off to get somewhere else. So, but like I say, I enjoyed it a fair amount, and I can see why it's regarded as bad. But it has that cult status, and people seem to like it now. So I just wanted to talk about the first Super Mario Brothers movie. I'm sure you guys have seen this, right?
Yeah, I have seen it. Bizarrely, I watched it because I may be wrong on this, but I think the production designer was the same guy who did the production design for Blade Runner.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is a pretty big leap from. Well, I mean, they're both science fiction, but they are fairly far apart in terms of what they're delivering. And I had this vague. I'm fairly sure. Again, this is another one I could be wrong on, but there was a story that when Bob Hoskins signed up for it, he had absolutely no idea what he was signing up for in any way, shape, or form. He just didn't have a clue about any of it. And that kind of because it was a bizarre film. It looked really good, great load of money on it. Didn't seem to make any sense at any particular time. It's not bad to watch, to be fair. Like, you sit and enjoy it. But you kind of wonder how it was allowed to continue. How someone didn't say, you know what, we should just stop for a couple of weeks and just all sit down and try and sort this out. They carried on gaming. Good on them, I say. I mean, making a film is hard, but in those circumstances, I mean, goodness, I'm amazed anything got out. But yeah, but also it didn't have that much. It had computer game references, but then it didn't really feel like a computer game film, which I guess is an achievement in a way.
Now, one of the things I read was that the designers and people who worked on the movie were very proud of the effects and the way it looked, and that it was ahead of its time in that respect. But as you say, it's a loose base. There's not very many of the video game tropes that you would expect to see, in a movie based on Super Mario. Obviously, the new one has a lot more of that because it's animated as well. But there's a lot more of that kind of thing in the newer movie. But yeah, no, like you say, it's not bad to watch, and I did enjoy it, and I probably will watch it again at some point. As notable movies of 1993 go, this is up there, along with, Alex, the movie that I believe you're going to talk about now, and we couldn't possibly have recorded this podcast without discussing.
It's true, yes. I've saved the best film ever made for my third and final choice. Not just the best film of 93, the best film ever made. It is, of course, Jurassic Park. Released for the blockbuster season, directed by Steven Spielberg, the king of the blockbuster, based on Michael Crichton's novel. And yeah, I think the best film ever made all around. Well, my biggest cinema regret was not going to see this in the cinema when it came out. I don't know why I didn't go and see it. I would have been 7, just about to turn 8. For some reason, I convinced myself it was going to be too scary for me. My parents and my brother were saying, come and see it. It's going to be amazing. But I don't know why I didn't go and see it. I was foolish in the extreme to not go and see it. Eventually, I saw it when it came out on VHS, or maybe when it came on TV for the first time. But I did manage to correct this historical error by going to the cinema on my own to see it when it was re-released for the 25th anniversary a few years ago now. Got the bus up to Cribbs Causeway on my own on a cold autumn night. Saw it in a cinema with, I think, 2 other blokes on their own as well, who were probably doing the same thing, had neglected to watch it when they were 8 years old as well, and were finally doing it. And I mean, I'd seen it a few times before that, but it is great in the cinema. I think the first time I became aware of it was when it was Barry Norman's film 93 came on the TV. And then I remember the logo coming up, on the screen behind Barry Norman. Mm-hmm. My brother saying, "Oh, I've heard about this. This is supposed to be really good." And it sort of seemed intriguing then. So yeah, that was the first I'd heard of it, and then obviously it became a massive thing. And I just think it's brilliant. I think the T-Rex scene, the first T-Rex scene with the water glass, and when it first appears, is one of the best set pieces in cinema history. I think it's just perfectly done. The Velociraptor scene in the kitchen, I think, is like horror inflected and really tense, even when you watch it now. Ellie Sadler, the character played by Laura Dern, I think is one of the best characters, one of my favorite characters, I should say, of 90s cinema. I think it's really well played by Laura Dern, and it's just a really well written female role, which was still a bit uncommon, I think, in the early 90s. And of course, the soundtrack is one of the best John Williams scores ever. And I just think it's all brilliantly paced. I think it's got a bit of everything, and there's not an ounce of fat on it. I just think it's the perfect action adventure film, and I was always going to choose it, and I would say it's the best film of the 90s. So there you go. What else can I say?
I've never seen it. I'm joking.
I almost hung up the call, Stu.
No, funnily enough, it was one of the first things I remember doing with wife of the pod, Beth, was watching Jurassic Park, actually, in my old bedroom at my parents' house. That was one of the first things we did together, I seem to recall. And I can't really add anything to what you said. It's obviously one of the greatest of all time, and fully deserving of that. I can't really add anything else to what you said.
What about you, Andy? What are your thoughts on it?
It's genius. And, the 7-year-old you was probably right to be scared, because I remember it being scary in the cinema, thinking, we haven't seen this, because it was something entirely new. We'd never seen. Those special effects were absolutely smashing it out of the park. It was mind-blowing. And the T-Rex scene, which you referenced, was just, it's pure horror. It's absolutely terrifying. And also, you've always got the added joy that there's the lawyer getting eaten when he's sitting on a toilet. And who doesn't like that? No, one of the great, and Spielberg was just he's one of the, it seems lazy to say Steven Spielberg is one of the best directors ever in the history of the world, possibly the best, but I don't think he's ever really put a foot wrong. Even Kingdom of the Crystal, even the Indiana Jones 4, the Crystal Skull one, was better than most other action films you'd ever see. Maybe not a bit with the fridge, but anyway.
I agree. Yeah, Spielberg. It's hard to overlook him. It's not the cool thing to say that he's the best or he's your favorite, but like you say, he's not put a foot wrong really. So how could he not be?
I don't know though. Which 1993 film had the better special effects, Jurassic Park or Super Mario Brothers? There's a debate there to be had, and I'm willing to sit here and have it with you guys if you'd like.
If only we had time. Unfortunately, we need to get onto our listener correspondence, don't we, to get that in. On Twitter, Requester90s, friend of the pod, said, well, first he used an Alan Partridge gif of Jurassic Park, of Alan saying Jurassic Park, which is the perfect time to use a perfect gif. They also said, I'll give a shout out to Last Action Hero, an Arnold Schwarzenegger film that I enjoyed, even if many didn't. It's one of the few films to feature a cinema projectionist as a character and sees Arnie take on the role of Hamlet at one point. So thanks for that, Requester90s. I have seen Last Action Hero. I don't remember. It seemed like, Andy, maybe you.
Yeah, it's right in my ballpark when it came out. Arnold Schwarzenegger, directed by John McTiernan, who directed Die Hard.
Yeah.
Massive amount of money. It had cameos from Robert Patrick, who played the villain in Terminator 2. Sharon Stone turned up. It was mental. The whole thing was insane about a kid going into an action movie through a golden ticket. It was like it was Willy Wonka but on steroids. It was a really good fun movie. Really good. It was one of the ones I wrote down on my list of would I push this as one of my top 3, but kind of just nudged out by Stallone. But really good movie.
Then on Instagram, Channel Nem said True Romance, one of my favourite films of all time. So thanks for that, Channel Nem. Stu, what have you got?
Yeah, over on Facebook, Ben Woodhouse says Jurassic Park changed so much it's hard not to hold that one up. And with a what's this? Surely Nightmare Before Christmas must be one of them too. Falling Down's defense gave Michael Douglas his second greatest role after Jack Colton in Romancing the Stone, clearly. It would be remiss of me too not to shout out Demolition Man, because it probably brought me many rewatchings of joy over the mid-90s. All that aside, 1993 gave me one of my favourite films of all time, Dazed and Confused. I'm not sure I truly grasped that in 93, though do remember first watching it on VHS sometime in the mid-90s. Thanks, Blockbuster. But as an adult, it's a film I'd always recommend, a genuine masterpiece. It is superb. I don't think we can argue with that particularly, can we?
I'm definitely not going to argue with that. I think Falling Down was one of my honourable mentions. Another example of that sort of LA set 90s film that has that LA aesthetic that I really like, and it's a great story. So
I'm absolutely with Alex on that one. Falling Down is definitely an honourable mention. Great movie, really good performance, good direction from Joel Schumacher, who went on to do Batman and Robin.
Speaking of honourable mentions, for me, Wayne's World 2, Addams Family Values. But Alex, I noticed a film in the list, and I wondered if you might have an opinion on this, seeing as you're an expert on the genre and on the area of film. Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yes, I don't think I've ever seen it. I think I was so appalled at the idea of turning Robin Hood into a comedy character, which doesn't make sense. I loved Maid Marian and Merry Men, so maybe that doesn't make sense. But I just thought, you're not Costner, so I think it's Gary Ewells or something. Ewers, I can't have to pronounce his name, but I wasn't having it, so I didn't watch it. I'm afraid. That's my take on it. Boycott, a hard boycott.
Also, which is the greatest movie of all time? Is it Robin Hood or Jurassic Park?
I think Jurassic Park is a bit easier to argue down the pub that it's the best film of all time out of those two. But it's maybe, my head says Jurassic Park and my heart says Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but
Okay, all right. Again, a debate for another time. Big Tim Parker, legend of the pod, gets in touch with his usual unedited stream of consciousness. He says, there's too many. Jurassic Park, Nightmare Before Christmas, Last Action Hero, Super Mario Brothers, Fugitive, Addams Family Values. I can't decide. And he didn't. He just sent them all in. So thanks for that, Tim. Are there any there we haven't spoken about? The Fugitive, that was number 3 in the list of highest grossing films. That's Harrison Ford, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I watched it about 5 hours ago, and it's still a good film.
I remember The Fugitive when it came out. It's Tommy Lee Jones that stood out for that one in me, because he was playing Tommy Lee Jones, but he's very good at playing Tommy Lee Jones, and I think that's a good thing. Good movie, very, very exciting movie.
Also, actually, this occurred to me watching it today. When you were at primary school, did people used to say it wasn't me, it was the one-armed man? Did people say that as like a joke?
No.
I heard that a lot, and it just occurred to me watching The Fugitive that that's about The Fugitive, because that's what they say in there. But I don't know, maybe no one else heard that at the time, but wow. It was a thing that people said.
Your year 4, your year group at school must have been real movie files.
Yeah, maybe I just heard it later on when I was at secondary school, and it lasted as a gag. I don't know. All right, do we have any other quick honourable mentions just to fire off from the hip, as it were?
It is worth chucking out there, and it's not really honourable mention, more an embarrassing mention, that there was a sequel to Weekend at Bernie's released in 1993. Weekend at Bernie's 2 got out. I don't even know how Weekend at Bernie's 1 got released, so how a sequel got made, utterly beyond me. Just chucking it out there.
I'd like to give a very quick mention to Coneheads. Never seen it, but just because it's got a great Red Hot Chili Peppers track called Soul to Squeeze on the soundtrack, which was the last track that John Frusciante recorded with the band before he left the first time. So Coneheads is another honourable mention for me for that reason alone.
I want to just give a mention to My Neighbor Totoro, which is one of the Studio Ghibli classics and came out in this year. I think Ghibli sort of became popular in this country much later, but that is when this one came out and it's a classic. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 came out this year. I remember going to see it in the cinema, one of my earliest cinema memories. I have a vague memory of Smarties doing white special edition Smarties, like not the whole pack, there'd just be white ones in the pack, and my family saving all the white ones and bringing them to the cinema for a snack. Just a weird early 90s memory for me. You can edit that out, it's so weird.
No, that's staying in. That's probably the best thing that's been said all night, to be fair. So that's definitely
And finally, I think we haven't mentioned either Mrs. Doubtfire, second on the box office. Nope. I still think it holds up when you watch it. I mean, when you get over the problematic premise of this dad who's not allowed to see his kids pretending to be a woman to sneak in and look after them in his ex-partner's house, all very weird, but it's still a very funny film, I think.
Very funny, safeguarding nightmare.
Exactly. That should have been the tagline.
I've got a story about Mrs. Doubtfire. I've just remembered it.
Go on.
I didn't go and see it myself. You might be shocked to hear, but my mum went to see it with one of her friends and came home early because there was a power cut at the cinema and they couldn't start the screen again.
Oh no!
I remember that vividly, but I must have been 4 years old.
One of your earliest memories.
How about that? Yeah.
Right. So, what do we think overall about the year 1993 in film? I should say.
Well, if you look at the list of highest grossers, I mean, we haven't even spoken about Schindler's List, which is regularly placed in the sort of top movies of all time. As I say, when you look at Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, Schindler's List, Cliffhanger, there are plenty of good movies in that top 10 list. And the other ones we've mentioned that didn't make the top 10 either. A very, very strong year, I think, and probably obviously notable for Jurassic Park. And really, that was the movie that, is it fair to say it heralded a new age of cinema, and that was how things were going to be from now on? And this was the first time we saw it. And for that reason, 1993 is a watershed in cinema.
It was a real change in the way that films were made. If you think that, you go back 4 years to 1989 when Batman came out, and it was all lots of practical effects, and then suddenly computer-generated monsters were roaming across the screen only 4 years later, and that has been the kind of... It's just been getting better and better and better, the quality of the special effects ever since then, really. So, yeah, a bit of massive change, a kind of watershed moment, as you said.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. A really good, strong year for film, and Jurassic Park typifies that, I think. So, yeah. 9 out of 10, I'd say, 1993.
I don't think anybody can disagree with that. Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you along for this. Will you come back next time and speak to us about some movies from another year? Would you be up for that?
Absolutely, definitely. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Really good fun to have a good chat about this stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, mate. Much appreciated. Many thanks to Andy for coming in to share his memories of the movies of 93 for us. A brilliant year, I think we agreed, didn't we?
Oh, fantastic, yeah. So many great films, brilliant top 10, and yeah, lots of films that I want to go away and watch now. Let's just end it there. Let's just play the theme music.
Well, don't go away just yet. Let's tell the listeners how they can get in touch with us first and what's coming up on the next episode.
Yeah, good idea. You can get in touch with your top films of 1993 or anything else you've heard on the pod, or any ideas for what's the most 90s, anything like that, using our link tree. You can find the link in the episode description. It's down there. We are on Twitter, Instagram. We have an email address which we check, I think, twice a year. And also you can find us on YouTube, all sorts of places. So go on there to find us.
Brilliant. And I just said that we would let you know what's happening next time, but in true fashion, we don't know. So we'll let you know when we do.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's going to be absolutely fantastic and lovely. So please do make sure you come back and listen to what we've got for you in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, we hope you enjoyed that rattle through our favourite movies of 1993. And until next time, it's goodbye from me. And hey, Alex, I think you're really cool. Not.
There's no need for that. And I think your fly's undone anyway.
Okay, we're on to our final choices already.
Hang on, I've got to do my second one yet.
Sorry,
Slow
mate.
down.
Slow
down.
I do apologise.